I came home after a month-long business trip expecting to find my parents relaxing in the guest room. Instead, I opened my bedroom door and found my younger sister Nicole asleep in my bed, her clothes hanging in my closet like she'd lived there for years. Then she looked at me completely calm and said, "Mom said you'd get over it." On my nightstand sat a blue folder containing a housing agreement with my name and a signature I had never written. That was the moment I realized someone hadn't just crossed a boundary. They had been preparing to erase it. Before I tell you how I uncovered everything, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is in your part of the world. If stories about family boundaries and hard-earned justice speak to you, I'd love for you to subscribe and join me for the rest of this journey. The opportunity landed in my inbox on a rainy Tuesday morning. I'd spent nearly 12 years building a career as a senior interior architect, mostly designing boutique hotels and luxury hospitality spaces throughout the Pacific Northwest. It wasn't glamorous the way television makes architecture look. Most days were budgets contractors permit revisions and conference calls that started before sunrise. But I loved it. I loved walking into an empty shell of a building and imagining what people would feel the first time they stepped inside after we were finished. When my firm's managing partner asked if I could oversee the final month of a resort renovation outside Aspen, Colorado, I didn't hesitate. "We need someone clients trust," he told me. "The owner specifically requested you." It meant 31 days away from Seattle. It also meant the biggest project of my career so far. That evening, I called my mother before she'd even heard the news from anyone else. "I'm heading to Colorado for about a month." "Oh, Chelsea," she laughed. "That's wonderful." "It is. You've worked so hard." For a few minutes, the conversation felt easy. She asked about the hotel, the mountains, whether I'd finally take a weekend off while I was there. Then her voice changed. "Actually, your father and I were wondering if we could ask you something." I already knew the tone. Whenever my mother began with, "We were wondering," it usually meant she wanted something she'd already convinced herself I would say yes to. "Our bathroom renovation starts next week," she said. "The contractor says they'll have to shut off the water for several days." Dad chimed in from somewhere behind her. "They're replacing the plumbing. The whole house will be torn apart." "We were thinking," Mom continued carefully, "maybe we could stay at your place until it's finished." I looked around my living room. The house wasn't enormous, but it had 3 bedrooms because I'd bought it with long-term plans in mind. One day, I imagined having a family. Until then, 2 bedrooms mostly collected books, project samples, and the occasional overnight guest. "Of course," I said. "You don't mind?" "No." "You've always been so generous." I smiled. "It'll actually make me feel better knowing someone's checking on the house while I'm gone." That part was true. Seattle winters could be unpredictable, and even though it was spring, I preferred someone being around rather than leaving the place empty for a month. Mom sounded relieved. "Oh, sweetheart, thank you." Dad added quietly, "We'll treat it like it's our own." Looking back now, I wish someone had told me those words could mean 2 very different things. The following Saturday, my parents came over with 2 suitcases, a cooler full of groceries, and enough homemade soup to feed a neighborhood. Mom hugged me before she'd even crossed the doorway. "We'll stay out of your way." "You'll barely know we're here." Dad carried his own bags upstairs despite his sore shoulder. "I'll sleep in the guest room." "I already made the bed," I told him. The arrangement seemed simple. They would use the downstairs guest bedroom. The master bedroom stayed locked only because I kept work documents there, although I wasn't particularly worried about them going inside. Before leaving, I walked both of them through the smart home system. "This app controls the thermostat." Mom nodded. "The security cameras." I only keep the exterior cameras active while I'm away. Dad listened carefully. The front door uses a digital lock. Both of you have temporary access codes. I showed him the screen. These 2 codes expire automatically the day after I get back. He looked impressed. You think of everything. I've learned to. Years of traveling for work had taught me that preparation solved most problems before they happened. I also opened the emergency contact list. If anything breaks, call these numbers. Mom laughed. You make it sound like we're running a hotel. I kind of designed them for a living. We both laughed. Nothing about that afternoon felt unusual. Nicole called while I was labeling a few storage bins in the garage. So you're leaving tomorrow? Early flight. Colorado sounds amazing. I'll probably spend most of my time inside construction meetings. Still better than Seattle rain. She sounded relaxed. Confident. Exactly like my little sister always had. Nicole and I had never been especially close, but we weren't enemies either. Growing up, we simply became different adults. I liked planning. Nicole preferred improvising. I saved money. She believed everything would somehow work itself out. She had a talent for making people feel sorry for her without ever asking directly. If a deadline was missed, someone else had pressured her. If a job didn't last, the manager had been unfair. If an investment failed, the market had been impossible. By 35, she'd changed careers more times than I could count. Real estate had seemed promising until interest rates climbed. Since then, she mostly talked about finding the right opportunity. Still, she'd always managed to keep an expensive apartment downtown. Nice clothes, designer handbags, weekend brunches posted on social media. I stopped trying to understand how the numbers added up. During our call, she said something that didn't seem important at the time. Mom said they're staying with you. Just while their plumbing gets replaced. That's nice. You could stop by for dinner if you want. She laughed softly. Oh, I won't bother them. It was such an ordinary sentence that I barely registered it. The next morning, I left before sunrise. Mom hugged me at the front door. Don't worry about us. Dad carried my suitcase to the car. Go make us proud. I drove toward the airport feeling unusually peaceful. My house was occupied. My parents were comfortable. The biggest project of my career was waiting. Everything in my life felt organized. Even after I landed in Colorado, Mom sent me pictures of the flowers blooming in my backyard. Dad texted that he'd brought the garbage bins in after collection day. Nothing suggested I had anything to worry about. 3 days later, after finishing a 12-hour construction meeting, I opened my home security app just to check the front porch. Instead of the usual camera feed, a gray message filled the screen. Device unavailable. Administrator settings changed. I stared at it for several seconds. That didn't make sense. There was only one administrator account. Mine. For the first minute, I assumed it had to be a software glitch. Technology failed sometimes. Apps logged people out. Updates broke things without warning. I closed the security app, reopened it, and signed in again. The same message appeared. Device unavailable. Administrator settings changed. A knot formed in my stomach. Nobody else should have administrator access. The temporary codes I'd created for my parents only unlocked the front door. They couldn't change security settings, camera permissions, or user accounts. I'd intentionally separated those features years earlier after hearing about someone whose cleaning service accidentally disabled their alarm system. I called my mother. She answered on the second ring. Hi, sweetheart. How's Colorado? It's good. That wasn't what I wanted to talk about. Mom, are the cameras working? There was a brief pause. I think so. You think so? I honestly haven't looked. My app says the administrator settings were changed. Oh, another pause. Maybe the Wi-Fi went down. The locks are still online? I don't know anything about those systems, honey. Neither did I expect her to. What about Dad? He's outside trimming your rose bushes. Could you ask him if anyone touched the security panel? A few muffled voices followed before Dad came on the phone. Everything okay? I hope so. I explained the message. Dad sounded genuinely confused. I haven't touched anything except the thermostat. No contractors. No. No repair technicians. No. He chuckled softly. You know me. Half of those screens scare me. Normally that answer would have reassured me. Instead, something about how quickly both of them dismissed it left me unsettled. All right, I said. Maybe it's just an update. I'm sure it is. After hanging up, I tried convincing myself he was right. The next morning started before sunrise. The resort project was entering its final inspection phase, which meant 12-hour days filled with contractors fixing tiny imperfections guests would never notice. A tile slightly out of alignment, a cabinet door closing too slowly, lighting temperatures that looked different once natural sunlight filled the lobby. By late afternoon, I was mentally exhausted. My phone buzzed while I was reviewing custom millwork in one of the guest suites. It was a text from my neighbor, Angela Ramirez. Angela had lived across the street from me for almost 7 years. We weren't best friends, but we'd become the kind of neighbors who collected each other's mail during vacations and texted whenever suspicious packages showed up. Angela, hey, hope Colorado's going well. Me busy but good. Everything okay? 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, she sent another message. Angela, random question. Did your sister move in? I stared at the screen. Me no. Why her reply came almost immediately. Angela, oh, I just saw a moving truck there this afternoon. My heart skipped. Moving truck, I stepped into an empty conference room and called her. She answered right away. I'm so sorry if I misunderstood. What did you see? A rental truck pulled up around lunchtime. Who was there? Your parents. And Nicole? I leaned against the wall. They were carrying boxes. What kind of boxes? I don't know. Furniture. I think so. How much? Angela hesitated. It wasn't just a couple things, Chelsea. What do you mean? They were unloading for almost 2 hours. Silence settled between us. I honestly thought maybe you'd decided to let Nicole stay there while you were gone. I never said that. Oh. Angela suddenly sounded uncomfortable. I'm sorry. No, don't apologize. What exactly did you see? I wasn't watching the whole time. But what? I saw clothing racks. My stomach tightened. And several plastic storage bins. She paused. They also carried a mattress upstairs. A mattress? Yes. I stopped breathing for a second. My guest room already has one. I know. Neither of us spoke. Finally, she said quietly, I almost came over to ask if they needed help, but Nicole told me she'd already talked to you. What exactly did she say? Angela thought for a moment. She said, another pause, that the family had decided she was moving in. Family, not Chelsea. Family. I thanked Angela and ended the call before she could hear the panic creeping into my voice. For several minutes, I simply stared out the conference room window toward the Colorado mountains. Nothing made sense. Even if Nicole needed somewhere to stay, why wouldn't anyone tell me? Why move furniture? Why a mattress? Why change the security settings? I called Nicole. She answered after 4 rings. Hey, sis. You didn't tell me you were at my house. I'm just helping Mom. Angela said there was a moving truck. Oh, she laughed lightly. That. Yes, that. I had a few things in storage. So you moved them into my house, just temporarily. Nicole. It's really not a big deal. It is if nobody asked me. You would have said yes. The confidence in her voice bothered me more than the words themselves. You didn't even give me the chance. It's only for a little while. What exactly did you move? Some clothes. What else? A few boxes. What else? My desk. I closed my eyes. What else? My bed. There it was. The truth. You moved your bed into my house. I couldn't fit everything in my apartment anymore. I didn't even know what that meant. Nicole, it's temporary. When were you planning on telling me? I figured we'd talk when you got home. My voice became noticeably colder. You don't move into someone else's house first and explain later. She sighed dramatically. I knew you'd react like this. No. You always make everything about rules. No. You've always had a bigger house. No. She fell silent. So, I asked carefully, which room? Another pause. The guest room. Silence. Nicole. Finally, she answered. We'll talk later. Then she hung up. I stared at my phone. She hadn't answered the question. She'd avoided it. Completely. That was when I stopped believing this was simply poor communication. I contacted the company that managed the smart lock system in my neighborhood. An hour later, Ethan Cole, the security specialist assigned to my account, called me back. I've reviewed your logs. And someone requested administrator access 4 days ago. I never approved that. I know. So how did it happen? It didn't. What does that mean? It means the request failed. I frowned. So why can't I access my cameras? Because several devices were manually disconnected afterward. Disconnected, yes. From inside the house. I felt the room tilt. Can you tell who did it? I can't identify the person. But I can tell you exactly when it happened. When? The same afternoon your neighbor reported seeing the moving truck. My phone buzzed again before I could ask another question. It was a photo from Angela. She'd apparently gone through the pictures on her phone. The image showed Nicole standing in my driveway. In one hand, she held a cup of coffee. In the other, she was unlocking my front door with a brand new key fob I'd never seen before. I barely slept the night before my flight home, not because I was angry. Anger comes later after your mind has accepted what's happening. I was still stuck in disbelief. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that photo Angela had sent me. Nicole standing on my front porch with a key fob that shouldn't have existed. The relaxed smile on her face, the confidence in the way she held herself. She didn't look like someone doing a favor. She looked like someone coming home. The next morning, I called my project manager. I need to leave today. He didn't ask many questions. You've never asked for emergency leave before. It is one. Go. By noon, I was at Denver International Airport. During the flight, my mother texted me, "Mom, how's everything?" I stared at the message for a long time before replying, "Me landing around 6, nothing else." She immediately responded, "Mom, wonderful. We'll have dinner ready." Dinner. As if nothing unusual had happened. As if my sister hadn't apparently moved into my house while I was gone. I spent the rest of the flight replaying every conversation from the past month. Had my parents lied? Had Nicole manipulated them? Or had all three of them agreed to something they knew I'd never approve? By the time the plane landed in Seattle, I wasn't looking for excuses anymore. I was looking for facts. I pulled into my driveway just after 7 in the evening. The first thing I noticed wasn't the porch light. It was Nicole's SUV, parked exactly where my car usually sat. I stopped the engine and stared through the windshield. Maybe she was visiting. Maybe she had just arrived. Maybe I caught myself. I had been making maybe excuses for 24 hours. No more. I carried my suitcase to the front door. The keypad looked different, not replaced, updated. Someone had installed a new protective cover over the lock, one I hadn't purchased. I entered my code. The door unlocked. At least my code still worked. Inside, everything smelled different. Not bad, just unfamiliar. The vanilla candle I usually kept in the hallway had been replaced by a floral diffuser that reminded me of department stores. A woven basket now sat beside the staircase. It wasn't mine. Neither was the decorative mirror hanging above it. Someone had rearranged my entryway. I slowly rolled my suitcase inside. "Mom," her voice came from the kitchen. "Chelsea." She hurried around the corner wearing one of my aprons. "Oh, sweetheart." She hugged me tightly. "You look exhausted." I didn't hug her back immediately. "Where's Dad?" "Picking up dessert." "And Nicole?" There was the smallest hesitation. "Upstairs." My mother said it as casually as someone saying she's reading a book. "Upstairs where—" Another pause. "In your room." She actually said it. No apology, no explanation, just the answer. I looked at her. "My room. Honey, my room." "It's only temporary." Without another word, I walked toward the stairs. Behind me, Mom called my name twice. I kept climbing. Halfway up, I noticed another change. Family photos lined the hallway. Except one was missing. The framed picture from my college graduation, the one Dad insisted on taking after I'd finished graduate school, was gone. In its place hung a photo of Nicole smiling on a beach vacation. I stopped. Who replaces someone else's family photo in their own house? I reached the bedroom door. It was closed. I rested my hand on the knob. For 1 second, I considered walking away. Maybe I wanted one more second before whatever waited behind that door became real. Then I opened it. The room didn't look like mine anymore. My navy comforter had disappeared. The cream-colored curtains I'd spent weeks choosing had been replaced with darker ones. My reading chair now sat in a different corner. The framed architectural sketches above the dresser were gone. In their place hung abstract prints I had never seen before. Then I looked at the bed. Nicole was asleep under my blankets, not guest blankets, mine. Her phone rested on my nightstand. A half-finished cup of tea sat on the coaster my best friend had given me years ago. Several shopping bags leaned against the closet. The closet door itself stood open. Rows of Nicole's dresses filled one side. Designer handbags occupied shelves where I'd kept project binders. For several seconds, I couldn't move. It wasn't just that she'd entered my room. She had erased me from it. The sound of the door opening woke her. She blinked twice before recognizing me. "Oh," she stretched lazily. "You're home early." No embarrassment, no panic, no guilt. Just mild surprise. I looked around again. "What is this?" Nicole sat up. "What?" "My bedroom." "Oh." She glanced around as if seeing it for the first time. "I moved a few things." "A few things." She smiled. "It feels warmer now." I actually laughed. Not because anything was funny, because my brain couldn't process the sentence I'd just heard. "You redecorated my bedroom?" "You were never into cozy spaces. This isn't your house. You weren't using it." I stared at her. "I wasn't using it because I was working." She shrugged. "You've been gone for weeks." My voice became very quiet. "Get out." She folded her arms. "Can we not do this tonight?" "I'm not asking again." Before either of us could say another word, Mom appeared in the doorway. "Chelsea, please." I turned toward her. When exactly did this happen? It just evolved. You know Nicole's apartment situation? No, I don't. Mom sighed. Things became difficult. So you gave her my bedroom? It seemed practical. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My bedroom. You have the biggest room. It's the only bedroom because I own this house. Mom rubbed her forehead. We thought once you saw how well everything worked, I interrupted her. You thought what? That maybe you'd agree. Agree to what? Neither of them answered. That silence told me more than any explanation could have. I walked over to my nightstand. Most of the drawers had been emptied. My journal was missing. So were several folders containing renovation sketches. Instead, sitting neatly beside the lamp was a blue document folder. It hadn't been there before I left. I picked it up. Nicole's expression changed instantly. Chelsea. I opened it anyway. The first page read Temporary Family Occupancy Agreement. Halfway down the page was my printed name. Chelsea Carpenter. Below it, a signature. One that looked similar enough to fool a stranger, but not me. I had signed thousands of contracts during my career. I knew every curve of my own handwriting. This wasn't mine. I slowly looked up. Who signed my name? No one answered. The silence inside my own bedroom felt heavier than any shouting ever could. I took out my phone. Without saying another word, I photographed every page in the folder. Then I walked past all of them, closed the bedroom door behind me, and dialed the only person I knew who would care more about evidence than emotion. Daniel Brooks answered on the second ring. Chelsea, I think someone forged my signature. There was a pause. Then he asked one question. Have you touched anything besides the documents? No. Good. His voice became calm and precise. Don't argue with anyone else tonight. I spent that night in a downtown hotel, not because I was afraid of my family, because Daniel had told me something that changed the way I looked at the entire situation. If this becomes a legal matter, he'd said over the phone, you don't want anyone claiming you accepted the arrangement by sleeping there or negotiating emotionally before preserving the evidence. So I should leave. For tonight, yes. Even though it's my house, especially because it's your house. I packed a small overnight bag without speaking to anyone. Mom followed me to the front door. Chelsea, don't make this bigger than it is. I stopped with my hand on the doorknob. Bigger than what? It was only supposed to help Nicole. You helped her by forging my signature. Mom's face immediately changed. We didn't forge anything. Then who did? She looked away. I don't know. It was the first time all evening she hadn't defended Nicole. She simply refused to answer. Daniel's office occupied the 6th floor of an older brick building overlooking Elliott Bay. I'd known him for nearly 6 years. He'd handled the legal paperwork when I bought my house and later helped me review contracts for several freelance consulting projects. He wasn't dramatic. He wasn't aggressive. He was the kind of attorney who listened for 20 minutes before asking the one question everyone else had missed. He closed the blue folder after reading every page. This wasn't prepared by a lawyer. How can you tell? He tapped the first paragraph. Because whoever wrote it borrowed language from several different online templates. He flipped another page. These clauses contradict each other. Another page. This section refers to landlord-tenant law. He looked at me. But you're not leasing your property. So it's worthless? He shook his head. Legally, yes. I felt myself breathe again. But whenever lawyers said but, you paid attention. It still tells us something. What? He slid the folder toward me. Nobody creates paperwork like this unless they expect to rely on it later. My stomach tightened. You think they planned this? I think somebody anticipated resistance. He pointed toward my signature. This forgery isn't sophisticated. It doesn't have to be. It only has to convince someone who doesn't know your handwriting." I looked at the page again. The signature really was close. Not perfect, but close enough that someone seeing it quickly might assume it was authentic. Daniel reached for a yellow legal pad. "I want to build a timeline." He drew a line across the page. "When did you leave Seattle?" I answered. "When did your parents move in?" I answered. "When did the camera disconnect?" I answered. "When did the moving truck arrive?" I answered. "When did Nicole first admit moving furniture?" I answered. He wrote every date carefully. When he finished, he leaned back. "The order matters." "Why?" "Because this wasn't spontaneous." He tapped the timeline. "First, they gained access. Then security disappeared. Then furniture arrived. Then documents appeared." He looked directly at me. "That's planning." Our next stop was the management office for the neighborhood's smart security system. Ethan Cole greeted us with a tablet already in his hands. "I've prepared everything I can legally release." He connected the tablet to a monitor. Rows of timestamps appeared, thousands of entries. Door unlocked. Door locked. Garage opened. Camera disconnected. Administrator request denied. Daniel stood beside me. "Walk us through it." Ethan nodded. "Your original administrator account was never compromised. So nobody hacked me. No." He zoomed in. "Someone inside the house repeatedly attempted to create a second administrator profile." "Using what?" "The wall-mounted control panel." "Could they?" "No." "Why not?" "Because final approval required your phone." I remembered several strange notifications I'd ignored while standing inside noisy construction meetings. At the time, I'd assumed they were software updates. Ethan continued. "When the requests failed." He clicked another screen. The indoor camera hub was physically unplugged. "Not disabled remotely." "No." "Unplugged." Daniel made a note. "What about the exterior cameras?" "They remained active." "Can we recover those recordings?" Ethan smiled faintly. "Already did." He opened the first video. The timestamp matched the afternoon Angela had described. "A moving truck backed into my driveway. Nicole stepped out first, then two movers, then my parents. Nobody looked confused. Nobody looked reluctant. Nobody behaved like this had been a last-minute emergency." Nicole stood in the driveway holding a clipboard. She pointed toward the front door, toward the garage, toward the upstairs windows. She looked like she was directing the move. I felt my chest tighten. Mom carried several shopping bags inside. Dad helped one mover lift a dresser. Daniel paused the video. "Continue." The next recording showed something worse. Nicole unlocking the front door, not with one of the temporary keypad codes, with a white key fob. Ethan enlarged the frame. "That fob belongs to this property." I frowned. "I've never seen it." "There were originally two." "I only received one." He nodded. "The builder kept the spare until closing." "So where did that one come from?" Ethan searched another database. A few seconds later, he found it. "Interesting." "What?" "This replacement was ordered 3 weeks ago." "I didn't order it." "I know." "Who did?" He turned the monitor toward us. The request form listed a name. Nicole Carpenter. Under relationship to homeowner, she had written immediate family residing at property. Daniel didn't say anything. He simply asked Ethan, "How was this approved?" Ethan frowned. "It shouldn't have been." He opened the internal notes. A customer service employee had written owner unavailable. Family member requested replacement access device after reporting loss of original. I looked at Daniel. "They impersonated me." "Maybe." "But there's more." Ethan clicked one final file. "I almost forgot." "What is it?" When replacement devices are issued, he enlarged another section. Yeah, customers must provide an email address. I leaned closer. It wasn't mine. It belonged to Nicole. Daniel quietly asked, "Can you print every document connected to this request?" "I already have." He handed us a stapled packet. At the very back was something neither of us expected. A scanned invoice from a moving company. Customer name Nicole Carpenter. Move description primary bedroom furniture relocation. Destination address my home. Daniel closed the folder slowly. Then he looked at me. "Chelsea." "What?" "I don't think your bedroom was ever meant to be temporary." I didn't cry after Daniel said those words. I expected to. Instead, I felt something colder settle over me. Clarity. Up until that moment, I'd been trying to understand how everything had spiraled so far out of control. I kept telling myself there had to be a misunderstanding somewhere, a conversation I'd missed, a bad decision that snowballed into something bigger. But people don't hire movers for a misunderstanding. They don't order replacement key fobs. They don't unplug security cameras. They don't create fake agreements with forged signatures. Those things require planning. Daniel gathered the documents into a neat stack. "I think it's time to talk to Nicole. I don't think she'll tell the truth." "Probably not. So why bother?" "Because sometimes people tell the truth accidentally." I looked at him. "What do you mean?" "They'll deny the important parts." He smiled faintly. "But they'll defend the parts they think are justified." Nicole agreed to meet me the following afternoon. Not at my house. At a coffee shop about 10 minutes away. She picked the location. Daniel advised me to go alone. "This isn't a deposition. It's a conversation. Record it. Washington is a 2-party consent state." I nodded. "I know. So don't secretly record anything." He handed me a notebook. "Take notes afterward instead." Nicole arrived 15 minutes late. Designer sunglasses, perfect makeup, a cream-colored blazer that probably cost more than most people spend on rent. If I hadn't known what was happening behind the scenes, I would have assumed her life was thriving. She smiled as she sat down. "You look tired." "I haven't been sleeping much." I figured. The waitress came by. Nicole ordered an oat milk latte, like we were meeting to discuss vacation plans. I didn't order anything. When the waitress left, I placed the moving company invoice on the table. Nicole glanced at it, then looked back at me. "So, you hired movers?" "I did. For my house." She folded her hands. "Our parents were staying there." "That's not what I asked." Silence. I slid another paper across the table. The replacement key fob request. "This too." She looked at it for barely a second. "I needed easier access." "You needed—" "Mom and Dad were living there. They weren't the ones who requested it. They asked me to help." I noticed something. She never actually denied filling out the form. I pulled out the next document. The moving invoice listing primary bedroom furniture relocation. "You moved your bedroom into my bedroom. It was the largest room. My room. You weren't there." I leaned back. I've been trying to understand something. "What? Why my room?" Nicole sighed dramatically. "Chelsea, no. I want an honest answer." She stirred her coffee even though she hadn't tasted it. "You always do this." "Do what?" "You act like every decision has to go through you." I stared at her. "It was my house." "You always say that." "Because it is." She looked around the cafe before lowering her voice. "You've had that house for years." "Yes." "It's too big. That's my choice." "You don't even have kids." There it was. Not anger, not desperation, resentment. She'd been carrying it for years. You have 3 bedrooms. So, I could barely afford my apartment. I waited. You had space. I had a mortgage. You had options. I had responsibilities. She leaned forward. You know what Mom always says. I already knew. Family takes care of family. She nodded. Exactly. So, your definition of taking care of family is moving into my bedroom while I was gone. She shrugged. I knew you'd calm down eventually. Those words hit harder than I expected, not because they were cruel, because she genuinely believed them. She thought my boundaries were temporary inconveniences. I reached into my folder again. This time I placed the blue agreement between us. Her expression changed. Only slightly. You've seen it? I have. I didn't write that. I didn't say you did. I didn't sign your name. I didn't say you did. She became noticeably uncomfortable. I just assumed Mom had talked to you. Nicole. I did. I have every text message from the last month. She looked away. I thought she would. There it was again. Not a denial, an assumption, or at least the version she wanted me to believe. I decided to change directions. How's your apartment? She didn't answer. Still have it? Silence. I asked a simple question. Finally, she exhaled. I gave it up. When? 3 weeks ago. So before I came home. She nodded. Why? She laughed softly. Because I couldn't afford it anymore. There it was. Finally. The first completely honest sentence she'd spoken all afternoon. My commissions disappeared. She looked out the window. The market slowed. I know. I had credit card debt. I stayed quiet. I refinanced. Another pause. It wasn't enough. She wrapped both hands around her coffee cup. The bank denied my second application. I wasn't surprised. Seattle's housing market had changed dramatically over the previous year. Real estate agents who'd been earning 6 figures suddenly found themselves fighting over far fewer transactions. I didn't tell anyone. You told Mom. She nodded. I told Mom. And Dad, eventually? What about me? She smiled without humor. You would have tried to fix it. I might have. And then you'd expect me to follow a budget. I blinked. What? You would have made spreadsheets. I almost laughed. Probably. You would have wanted to know where every dollar went. Yes. I didn't want another parent. There was more honesty in that sentence than in everything else she'd said combined. She hadn't wanted help. She'd wanted rescue without accountability. You know what the worst part is? She asked quietly. What? I wasn't jealous of your money. She looked directly at me. I was jealous that your life kept working. The sentence hung between us. For the first time since I'd come home, I saw something besides entitlement. Shame. Real shame. I kept thinking, she swallowed, if I could just stay there long enough. My heartbeat quickened. Long enough for what? She stopped herself, then shook her head. It doesn't matter. It matters to me. She stood. I've said enough. She reached for her purse. As she turned to leave, she spoke without looking back. It wasn't even my idea at first. I froze. What wasn't? She hesitated only a second. Moving into the house. Then she walked out of the coffee shop. I sat there long after she disappeared. Daniel had been right. She hadn't confessed intentionally. She'd defended herself. And in doing so, she'd admitted something far more important. Someone else had suggested the plan before she ever agreed to it. When I returned to my car, my phone vibrated. It was a text from my mother. Can we please talk tonight? There's something your father and I should have told you before you came home. I read my mother's text 3 times before starting the car. There's something your father and I should have told you before you came home. The wording bothered me, not because it admitted they had hidden something, because it suggested they had hidden it together. For the first time since I'd returned to Seattle, I wasn't wondering whether my parents had been manipulated. I was wondering how much they had willingly participated. Daniel answered on the first ring. How did it go? Better than I expected. I summarized everything Nicole had said, repeating her exact words as accurately as I could. When I finished, Daniel remained quiet for several seconds. Interesting. That's all you have to say? No. What are you thinking? I'm thinking Nicole just shifted responsibility. You think she's lying? I think she's sharing just enough truth to make herself look less responsible. I sighed. That sounds like her. Did she say who came up with the idea? No. Then don't guess. I wasn't planning to. Good. He paused. If your parents want to talk tonight, listen more than you speak. You think they'll confess something? I think guilty people often fill silence. I arrived at my house just before 7. Nicole's SUV was gone. Only my parents' sedan remained in the driveway. For the first time in days, the house felt quiet. Too quiet. Mom opened the front door before I reached it. Chelsea. She looked exhausted. Her eyes were swollen. Dad stood several feet behind her. His shoulders slumped in a way I'd rarely seen before. Neither of them tried to hug me. That alone told me the evening would be different. We made dinner, Mom said softly. I'm not hungry. Please. I followed them into the dining room. Nobody touched the food. The roast chicken sat untouched in the center of the table, while 3 glasses of iced tea slowly collected condensation. Dad cleared his throat. I'm sorry. Those were the first words he spoke. I should have said that days ago. I nodded, but said nothing. Daniel's advice echoed in my head. Listen more than you speak. Mom folded and unfolded a paper napkin. We never wanted to hurt you. I looked at her. But you did. She closed her eyes. I know. Silence settled over the room. Finally, Dad spoke again. Nicole came to us about 6 weeks ago. That was before I'd left for Colorado. She was crying. Mom immediately added she'd received another notice from the bank. I stayed quiet. They were threatening legal action? Because of her debt, Dad nodded. She didn't have enough savings. Mom leaned forward. She said she'd lose everything. I noticed something. Neither of them denied knowing about Nicole's financial situation before I did. They had simply never told me. What happened then? I asked. Mom answered carefully. She said she couldn't keep paying rent. And she asked if she could stay with us. I frowned. At your house? Dad looked embarrassed. Our house was about to be under construction. So you suggested mine. Mom looked down. Yes. There it was. Not Nicole. Mom. She continued quietly. You weren't using it. My house. You were gone. For work. We thought... Her voice cracked. We thought you'd understand. Did you ask me? No? Why? She couldn't answer. Dad did. Because we thought if we asked first. He swallowed. You might say no. The honesty almost hurt more than another lie would have. So instead you made the decision for me. Neither of them argued. Mom wiped away a tear. It sounded temporary. Moving trucks aren't temporary. She looked genuinely confused. What do you mean? I stared at her. You didn't know. She slowly shook her head. Know what? I opened my briefcase and placed the moving invoice on the table. Mom read it once. Then again. Her face drained of color. Primary bedroom furniture relocation. She looked at Dad. I never saw this. Dad frowned. I didn't either. I watched both of them carefully. For the first time, their reactions didn't look rehearsed. Mom reached for another document. The replacement key fob request. What is this? Nicole ordered a replacement access device using my address. Mom blinked. I thought she was only borrowing your keypad code. You knew she had access. I knew she was helping while we stayed there. Helping. That word had apparently covered a great deal. I placed one more document on the table. The forged occupancy agreement. Mom stared at it for several long seconds. Then she whispered, I've never seen this. Dad adjusted his glasses. His eyebrows slowly pulled together. I signed this. I looked at him. What? He pointed toward the last page. My witness signature. I turned the document over. He was right. There it was. Thomas Carpenter, signed as a witness. My pulse quickened. You signed this? He nodded weakly. Nicole asked me. What exactly did she tell you? She said it was paperwork proving she could stay temporarily while looking for another apartment. You didn't read it. He lowered his head. No. You signed a legal-looking document without reading it. He didn't defend himself. I trusted my daughter. The room became painfully quiet. Mom slowly turned toward him. You told me it was just insurance paperwork. I thought it was. You never looked. He shook his head. I should have. Mom's eyes filled with tears again. Chelsea, I swear to you. I never knew there was a fake signature. I believed her, not because she deserved the benefit of the doubt, because her confusion matched facts she couldn't have anticipated. She hadn't known about the moving invoice either. She hadn't known about the replacement key. She hadn't known Dad had signed as a witness. Everyone had apparently been told a different version of the same story. Nicole hadn't just manipulated me. She had managed the information flowing to everyone involved. Dad suddenly pushed his chair back. I need to show you something. Without waiting for an answer, he walked upstairs. A minute later, he returned carrying a large white envelope. I found this yesterday. He handed it to me. It was underneath some sweaters in the guest room closet. The envelope wasn't sealed. Inside was a folded sheet of notebook paper. It wasn't addressed to anyone. The handwriting belonged to Nicole. I recognized it immediately from birthday cards she'd written over the years. It wasn't a letter someone had sent. It looked like a draft she'd never finished. The first paragraph read, If I can stay long enough, everyone will get used to me being there. Once it feels normal, Chelsea won't want another family fight. Then we can convince her it's smarter to treat the house like a family asset instead of just hers. I stopped reading. Nobody spoke. Finally, Mom whispered, Oh my God. Dad covered his face with one hand. I didn't know. I believed him. For the first time since all this began, I truly believed him. Not because he was innocent. He wasn't. His silence and carelessness had helped create this mess. But I no longer believed he'd understood the destination. He'd only seen the first step. Nicole had seen all the rest. I carefully placed the handwritten draft back into the envelope. Then I looked at both of my parents. I'm sending Nicole a formal legal notice tomorrow. Mom nodded through tears. Dad closed his eyes. Neither of them asked me not to. Neither of them told me to let it go. They already knew they'd crossed a line that apologies alone couldn't erase. As I stood to leave, Daniel called. I finished preparing the notice. I looked at the envelope in my hand. Good. When do you want it delivered? I glanced toward the staircase leading to the bedroom that was finally starting to feel like mine again. First thing tomorrow morning. At exactly 9:00 the next morning, Daniel Brooks knocked on my front door. He wasn't carrying a briefcase. He was carrying a thick manila folder. "Morning," he said. "You ready?" "I don't know." He gave me a small smile. "You don't have to feel ready. You only have to be clear." That sentence stayed with me. Clear. Not angry, not vindictive. Clear. Mom and Dad were already sitting in the living room when Daniel arrived. Neither of them had slept much. Dad looked like he'd aged 5 years overnight. Mom kept twisting her wedding ring around her finger, something she'd only done during stressful moments. Nicole came downstairs a few minutes later. She froze when she saw Daniel. "What is he doing here?" Daniel introduced himself politely. "My name is Daniel Brooks. I'm Ms. Chelsea Carpenter's attorney." Nicole laughed. "Oh my God! You actually hired a lawyer." "I did." She looked at our parents. "Seriously?" Neither Mom nor Dad answered. That silence caught her off guard. She turned back toward me. "So we're really doing this?" I met her eyes. "No, I'm doing this. You made that choice weeks ago." For a brief moment, she looked genuinely confused. Then she rolled her eyes. "This is ridiculous." Daniel placed the manila folder on the dining table. "I'd like everyone to remain seated." Nobody moved. He opened the folder carefully. "I'm not here to argue. I'm here to establish facts." Nicole folded her arms. "Go ahead." Daniel slid the first document across the table. The original text conversation between my mother and me before I left for Colorado. Highlighted in yellow was one sentence. "You and Dad are welcome to stay while your plumbing is being repaired." Daniel spoke calmly. "This is the only written permission Chelsea gave." He looked around the room. "It applies solely to Evelyn and Thomas Carpenter." Nicole didn't respond. He placed a second document beside the first. The access log from Ethan's office. "The homeowner issued temporary entry codes for her parents." He pointed to another highlighted section. "No authorization was ever granted to Nicole Carpenter." Nicole shifted in her chair. Daniel continued. "The third document, the replacement key fob request. This request lists Nicole Carpenter as an immediate family member residing at the property." He paused. "The homeowner never submitted this request." Nicole looked toward our mother. Mom slowly shook her head. "I didn't know about that." Daniel nodded slightly before laying out another page. "The replacement key was collected 3 weeks before Chelsea returned home." Nicole finally spoke. "I needed easier access." Daniel looked at her. "Access to property you did not own." She looked away. He moved on. The fourth document appeared. The moving company invoice. He read it aloud. "Primary bedroom furniture relocation." Then he asked one simple question. "Nicole, did you hire this moving company?" She hesitated. "Yes." "Did Chelsea authorize this move?" Silence. "Nicole." "No." The room felt smaller. Daniel wasn't raising his voice. He didn't need to. Every answer built upon the one before it. He placed several printed photographs onto the table. Angela's photos. Nicole directing movers. Nicole carrying boxes upstairs. Nicole unlocking the front door. Mom covered her mouth. "I thought they were only bringing clothes." Nicole looked irritated. "I didn't think furniture mattered." Daniel didn't react. Instead, he pulled out another envelope. The handwritten draft letter. He looked at me. "Would you like me to read it?" I nodded. He unfolded the page. His voice remained steady. "If I can stay long enough, everyone will get used to me being there. Once it feels normal, Chelsea won't want another family fight. Then we can convince her it's smarter to treat the house like a family asset instead of just hers." Silence. Nobody breathed. Nicole reached toward the paper. "That's private." Daniel calmly moved it out of reach. "You left it in the residence." It wasn't finished. It still reflects intent. Nicole stood abruptly. You can't use a rough draft against me. No, Daniel replied. But combined with everything else, it helps explain your actions. She looked directly at me. You really think I'd steal your house? I answered honestly. I think you convinced yourself you weren't. That sentence landed harder than I expected. Nicole's expression shifted, not to guilt, to frustration. You've always had everything, I almost interrupted. Then I remembered Daniel's advice. Let people explain themselves. She continued. You bought this place when the market was cheaper. I worked for it. You had opportunities. I created them. You never had to start over. I looked at her quietly. You never asked how many weekends I worked. She didn't answer. You never asked how many vacations I canceled. Nothing. You never asked how many nights I slept in hotels so I could save enough for a down payment. Nicole stared at the floor. Finally, she whispered, I know. No. You know now. Daniel waited until the room became quiet again. Then he removed one final document from the folder. A formal notice. I am serving Ms. Nicole Carpenter with written notice that her permission to occupy the property is denied, and that she must remove all personal belongings by 5 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. Nicole looked up sharply. You can't be serious. I am. This is my sister. Daniel answered before I could. And this is her home. Nicole turned to our parents. Say something. Mom wiped tears from her face. We should have asked Chelsea before any of this. Mom, we were wrong. Nicole looked at Dad. He spoke so quietly I barely heard him. I should have read what I signed. The room fell silent again. For the first time since this ordeal began, Nicole realized she was standing alone. She looked back at me. So that's it. I took a slow breath. No. Then what? I genuinely hope you rebuild your life. She blinked. But you're not rebuilding it with my home. For several long seconds, nobody spoke. Then Nicole quietly walked upstairs. No slammed doors, no shouting, just footsteps. An hour later, she came back downstairs carrying 2 suitcases. I'll come back tomorrow for the furniture. Daniel nodded. Please coordinate through my office. She looked at me one last time. I never thought it would end like this. I answered truthfully. Neither did I. She picked up her bags and walked out the front door. None of us followed her. We simply listened as her SUV backed out of the driveway and disappeared down the street. The silence she left behind felt almost unfamiliar. I looked around my own living room. For the first time in weeks, I could finally breathe. Then Dad quietly asked, Chelsea, when this is all over, is there any chance you'll ever trust us again? Dad's question stayed with me long after the front door closed behind Nicole. Is there any chance you'll ever trust us again? I didn't answer right away. Not because I wanted to punish him, because I didn't know the answer. Trust isn't something you decide to feel. It's something other people rebuild through consistent actions. I don't know, I finally said. It was the most honest response I could give. Dad nodded slowly as if he'd expected nothing else. I understand. Mom wiped another tear from her cheek. We don't expect things to go back to normal overnight. I looked at both of them. I don't think they'll ever go back to what they were. Neither of them argued. The next 2 weeks were surprisingly quiet. Nicole returned the following afternoon with a rental truck. Just like Daniel had instructed, everything went through his office. There were no surprise visits, no emotional confrontations, no dramatic scenes on the front lawn. She arrived with 2 movers, packed her belongings, signed an inventory confirming everything she'd taken and left before sunset. I watched from inside the house. Not because I wanted to supervise her, because I wanted to make sure the process ended cleanly. When the truck pulled away, I walked upstairs. My bedroom looked strangely empty. The dark curtains were gone. The floral diffuser had disappeared. Her clothes, shoes, and furniture had all been removed. But the room still didn't feel like mine. It felt borrowed. I stood there for several minutes before opening every window. Fresh air drifted inside. I stripped the bed completely. Every sheet, every pillowcase, every blanket. Not because Nicole had slept there, because I needed to make the room feel like a beginning instead of a reminder. Over the next several days, I repainted one accent. Wall rehung my architectural sketches and put my graduation photo back where it had always belonged. When I finished, I realized something. I wasn't restoring the room. I was reclaiming it. Daniel stopped by the following Friday with one final folder. "Everything's signed." He handed me several documents. "The occupancy matter is closed." I skimmed the paperwork. Nicole had acknowledged that she had no ownership interest in the property, no tenancy rights, and no future claim arising from her stay. "I never wanted this to become legal." "I know, but I'm glad it was documented." "So am I." He smiled. "Clear boundaries prevent messy arguments." Before leaving, he asked one unexpected question. "Have you changed your guest policy?" I laughed softly. "I have one now." He nodded approvingly. "Good." A week later, Mom called. "Would you have dinner with us?" "At your house?" She hesitated. "Wherever you're comfortable." I appreciated that answer. 3 weeks earlier, she would have simply assumed I'd come over. "There's a cafe near Green Lake. We'll meet you there." When I arrived, both of my parents were already seated. Dad stood as I approached. Mom looked nervous. Neither of them reached for a hug. They waited. I decided that mattered. After we ordered, Mom reached into her purse. "I have something." She handed me an envelope. Inside was a cashier's check. $5,000. I looked at her. "What is this?" "We estimated what it cost you." "The hotel." "The locksmith." "The legal consultations." "The repainting." I shook my head. "You don't owe me." "We do." Dad interrupted gently. "This won't fix what happened." "We know that." But pretending it didn't cost you anything would be another lie. I stared at the check. The amount wasn't exact. It wasn't meant to be. It was acknowledgement. Something I'd been waiting for more than reimbursement. "I appreciate this," I said quietly. Mom nodded. "Thank you for accepting it." Dinner wasn't easy. There were long pauses, awkward silences, conversations that stopped and started again, but nobody defended what had happened. Nobody blamed me for involving a lawyer. Nobody asked when I'd let Nicole come back. That absence spoke louder than any apology. The biggest change happened the following weekend. Mom called Saturday morning. "Would it be okay if we stopped by?" I almost smiled. She had never asked before. "What for?" "I baked banana bread." I looked at my calendar. "I can meet you on the porch." "Perfect." An hour later, they arrived. They didn't park in the driveway. They parked on the street. Dad carried the loaf of banana bread. Mom stood beside him with empty hands. Neither of them stepped toward the front door. They waited. I opened it. We talked for about 20 minutes, mostly about ordinary things, Dad's tomato plants, my current hotel project, the weather. When they left, Mom hugged me, very briefly. Then she said something I hadn't expected. "Thank you for letting us visit." Visit. Not come over, not stop in. Visit. The distinction mattered. That evening, I sat in my living room with a notebook on my lap. Across the top of the page, I wrote "Family Guest Agreement." It wasn't complicated. One page, plain English, no legal jargon. Anyone staying overnight for more than 3 consecutive nights would receive written permission. No one could invite additional guests. No one could move furniture. No one would receive access devices without my approval. No changes to lock security systems or rooms. Simple, clear, respectful. I printed 3 copies. 1 stayed in my home office. 1 went into my safe. 1 I emailed to my parents. Mom replied less than 10 minutes later. "We understand. We should have respected these boundaries from the beginning." I read the message twice, then closed my laptop. For the first time in weeks, the silence inside my house didn't feel lonely. It felt peaceful. As I was getting ready for bed, my phone vibrated. A message from Nicole. Not an apology, not yet. Just 1 sentence. "I finally understand why you kept saying this wasn't about the bedroom." I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I set the phone face down on my nightstand. Some conversations deserved an answer. Others deserved time. I decided this one could wait until I knew which it was. 3 months later, life no longer revolved around what had happened inside my house. That more than anything felt like healing. People often imagine healing as a dramatic moment, a heartfelt apology, a tearful reunion, or one conversation that magically fixes everything. That wasn't my experience. Healing looked much quieter. It looked like making coffee on a Saturday morning without wondering who might be walking through my front door. It looked like coming home from work and finding everything exactly where I'd left it. It looked like unlocking my own bedroom without feeling that strange knot in my stomach. One afternoon, I stood in the doorway of that room, sunlight spilling across the hardwood floor. My navy comforter was back. My architectural sketches hung where they'd always belonged. The graduation photo Dad had once proudly insisted on framing sat on the bookshelf again. Nothing expensive had changed, but everything important had. For the first time since returning from Colorado, the room felt completely mine. Work became busy again. The Aspen Resort opened successfully, and our firm landed 2 new hospitality projects because of it. My manager called me into his office one morning. "The client specifically mentioned you. Hopefully for good reasons?" He laughed. "They said you kept the entire project together under impossible circumstances." I smiled. If only they knew. He offered me the chance to lead another major renovation in California later that year. This time I accepted without hesitation. 3 months earlier, I would have worried about leaving my home. Now I didn't. Not because I'd become more trusting, because I'd become better prepared. The locks had been replaced. The security system had been upgraded. Every administrator account required multi-factor authentication. Angela still kept an eye on the neighborhood whenever I traveled. And more importantly, the people who mattered understood my boundaries. One evening, an envelope arrived in my mailbox. No return address. I recognized the handwriting immediately. Nicole. I carried it inside but didn't open it for almost an hour. Eventually, curiosity won. Inside was a handwritten letter. Not a legal document. Not an excuse. Just several pages written in blue ink. She began simply, "Chelsea, I've rewritten this letter more times than I can count because every version sounded like I was defending myself. I'm done doing that." I kept reading. She admitted she had been drowning financially long before she told anyone. She admitted she'd been embarrassed by how quickly my career had stabilized while hers seemed to collapse. She admitted she had convinced herself that because I was single, financially secure, and lived alone, I wouldn't really lose anything by sharing my home. Then came the sentence that stayed with me. I kept calling it borrowing space because admitting I was taking something that wasn't mine would have forced me to stop. I read that line twice. It explained more than all our arguments ever had. Nicole continued, She wrote about watching me work through college, take extra internships, decline vacations, and save every bonus instead of spending it. She admitted she'd once admired those choices. Over time, admiration had quietly turned into resentment. Not because I'd done anything to her, because my discipline reminded her of the decisions she hadn't made herself. Near the end of the letter, she wrote, "I don't expect you to forgive me quickly. I don't expect another key to your house. Honestly, I don't expect anything. I just wanted you to hear one sentence from me that doesn't come with a hidden agenda. I'm sorry." I folded the letter carefully. Then I placed it inside the same fireproof safe where I'd stored the forged occupancy agreement months earlier. One document represented manipulation, the other represented accountability. I wanted to remember the difference. A few weeks later, my parents invited me to meet them at a small cafe overlooking Puget Sound. Not at their house, not at mine, neutral ground. Dad smiled as I approached. "Good to see you. You too." Mom waited until we'd ordered lunch before speaking. "We've started seeing a family counselor." I blinked. "Really?" She nodded. "We realized we confused helping with enabling." Dad quietly added, "I spent too many years avoiding conflict. I thought keeping everyone happy meant staying silent." It didn't. No. It only made the loudest person feel supported. I appreciated his honesty, not because it erased what happened, because it showed he was finally examining his own role instead of blaming circumstances. Mom reached across the table. She didn't take my hand. She simply rested hers on the table between us. "We're learning to ask instead of assume." I smiled. "That's a good place to start." That fall I hosted Thanksgiving, not because anyone expected me to, because I chose to. The invitations were simple. Arrival time, dinner time. One final sentence at the bottom. "Please let me know before inviting additional guests." No one complained, no one joked about it, no one rolled their eyes. They simply replied, "Of course." Nicole wasn't there. She'd accepted a new job with a property management company in Portland and decided to spend the holiday with coworkers instead. She sent a text that morning. "Happy Thanksgiving. I hope your home feels peaceful again." I replied, "It does. I hope you're doing well. Nothing more. It wasn't cold. It wasn't overly warm. It was honest. And for us, honesty was progress. Sometimes people ask whether I forgave my family. The answer is yes. But probably not in the way they imagine. Forgiveness didn't erase what happened. It didn't restore automatic access to my home. It didn't mean everyone received another chance without earning it. Forgiveness simply meant I stopped carrying the weight of what they had done. Boundaries remained. Trust had to be rebuilt. Those are different things. The blue folder still sits inside my safe. I don't keep it because I want to relive the betrayal. I keep it because it reminds me of something I once struggled to believe. Love without respect eventually becomes permission. Family without boundaries eventually becomes entitlement. And home isn't defined by the people who have keys. It's defined by the person who has the right to decide who receives one. Some of the deepest wounds don't come from strangers. They come from the people who sincerely believe they're entitled to more of your life than you've ever agreed to give. If you've ever been the responsible one in your family, you may know how easy it is for love to slowly become expectation and for expectation to become obligation. Setting boundaries isn't an act of revenge. It's an act of self-respect. You can care about people while still saying no. You can forgive someone without restoring the same level of access they once had. Reconciliation requires trust, and trust is rebuilt through consistent actions, not promises, guilt, or shared history. If you've ever found yourself carrying the weight of everyone else's choices, I hope this story reminds you that protecting your peace doesn't make you selfish. It makes you responsible for the life you've worked so hard to build. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family? What would you have done if you were in Chelsea's position? Share your perspective in the comments. If you enjoyed stories about family boundaries, accountability, justice, and healing, consider subscribing for more. This is a fictional story created for entertainment, education, and reflection.